Welcome to the Game Changers Podcast, your connection to the world's most powerful influencers in leadership, personal development, and entrepreneurship. Here's your host, professional athlete, author, speaker, and game changer himself, Rennie Curran. It's time to get your head in the game.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Game Changers Podcast. My name is Rennie Curran. For those of you all who are just joining for the first time, I am a former professional athlete, speaker, author, life and business coach. For most of all, I am a game changer. I want to first and foremost start off by just giving a major shout out to all those fathers out there. As you know, we just celebrated Father's Day this past weekend. So I really want to salute all those men who are just sacrificing, who are working hard, doing whatever it takes for their families, and just having an impact on everybody around them. And also those men who aren't direct fathers to somebody, but who serve as a father figure. I'm sure that we can all think about that teacher, that coach, that mentor who just poured into us and made us believe in ourselves before we even believed in ourselves. So I just really want to salute you, men, and to all those fathers who aren't necessarily being the best fathers that they know they can be. I just challenge you to just step up to the plate. There's no better job. And then to those fathers who are there but not spending that quality time and taking things for granted, I challenge you, man. It's never too late to turn things around and just be that man that you were created to be. So without any further ado, I just want to hop right into the interview. I'm excited for you guys to listen to this next guest. I hope it inspires you. I hope it encourages you. And I hope that it helps you have an amazing week this week. So here it is. I'm excited to welcome my next guest to the Game Changer Podcast, an amazing guy who I actually met through fellow Bulldog Malcolm Mitchell at an event that Malcolm had for his children's book, The Magician's Hat. He's a producer, director, and CEO of Golo Productions, based right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Please welcome Game Changer David Goldstein.
Thank you, Rennie. Happy to be here. Honored to be here. Excited, and also, I must say, a little bit impressed, my man. I saw the picture of the cover for the podcast. You're looking good.
Oh yeah,
you're looking sharp, and so I'm excited to be on, man.
Man, I appreciate it. I'm definitely humbled to have you on, man. You're a guy who's done a lot of amazing things, and definitely somebody who I feel like is a game changer in what you do in your industry, man. So I'm really excited to just learn more about how you were able to get there and just some of the things that you do just to kind of create that sustainable success. I know in some of our meetings, man, we just kind of talked about, you know, the leadership aspect, the especially the personal development, and just like, you know, what you've done as an entrepreneur to just kind of stay on top of your game. And so that's what I'm excited about, man, to learn about you and the things that you're doing and continue to do, man. So, yeah, thanks for being on.
Yeah, no problem. And I think the cool thing about the title Game Changer that you have for your podcast is, you know, it definitely works in football. It works in sports. But to me, while it, you know, the reason it can cross over into so many different industries is, you know, it's important to be a game changer. And in order to be a game changer in your industry, there's only one way to do it, and that's hard work. And I believe that. And, you know, I think that no matter what you're trying to do, that's the way to success is hard work. As you know, I mean, there's no shortcut. And I know, you know, when it's rehab or whatever it is you were going through, or, you know, rehabbing your knee, or, you know, working to get on the field, or working to make it in the league, there's no such thing as a shortcut. So I think in order to be a game changer, you just got to put in the work. Yep,
exactly right, man. Exactly right. Well, speaking of putting in the work, man, I want to hear about the work that you put in. I want to hear about like your story, man, just from the beginning to where you are now, some of the things that you went through to get here, man. So tell me about that.
Yeah, no problem. So I started my career at HBO Sports as a associate producer, which is really just a fancy name for production assistant or PA. Started back in 2004 as a associate producer, production assistant, whatever you like to call it, at HBO Sports. So I worked on the Bob Costas show. That was my first show out of college, which I was blessed to have that job. I had worked the year before as an intern at HBO Sports for a summer. So it was a 3-month internship, and I was lucky enough to work on a groundbreaking story for Real Sports and put in a lot of work. And like we were talking about the no shortcut thing, you know, even as an intern, I would stay 14, 15 hours a day every day that summer and show the producer and the associate producer that I was willing to put in the work. So some way or another, that kind of stuck, and you know, they remembered my name, remembered my face. So when it came time to graduate college and get a job, I was hitting them every month. Hey, you guys got anything? You got anything? You got anything? Sure enough, they had an associate producer, production assistant job open on the Costa show. So I started there in 2004 and was there for 5 years. And you know, that was the hardest, while it was maybe the least sexy title I've ever had as a, you know, in my career, it was definitely the hardest I ever worked. You know, I would say that I was working, you know, not banker's hours, but investment banker's hours, you know, financial guy's hours, but not making the financial guy money, that's for sure. So, you know, I started there 5 years and lived in a little, you know, apartment that made my mom cry when she walked into the apartment, my first, you know, in the East Village in New York City. And, you know, but what happened there was I learned two things. I learned that, you know, in order to get where you want, you got to work really hard, but you got to learn from really great people. And that's where I had the benefit from, was, you know, being at HBO Sports at that time was sort of like the top of the mountain for sports television. They were doing some amazing things, amazing documentaries, real sports, Bob Costas. So I got to learn from the best in the business. And, you know, that sort of gave me my credentials, similar to you, like playing in the SEC. If you can make it in the SEC, then they give you an extra look in the league, right? And that's how HBO Sports was for me, was, you know, I worked my butt off when I was there. I was there 5 years. It was time for me to move on. And when it was time to move on, I got that second look from guys, because they said, hey, he was able to make it there, and he's getting endorsements and recommendations from guys there. He's definitely put in the work, and he's learned from the right people. So that's where I started, was HBO Sports, was there 5 years. Did the Olympics for NBC one summer in Beijing. And that kind of started my freelance career. I was a freelance producer and director for all of about 6 months, because even though I had that HBO Sports experience, I was still pretty young in the game. I was like 29, and I thought, hey, you know, this is going to be a place for me that, you know, like, now that I went to HBO Sports, I can be a producer and director anywhere, and a lot of people are going to hire me. And that wasn't the case. So I kind of went about 6 months without getting steady work. I would work a couple shows, you know, a few days a month, that kind of thing. But I kind of saw that the freelance market wasn't ready for me, or I wasn't ready to start my own business. And so I actually went to work waiting tables. So I waited tables for about 3 months in my hometown of Birmingham, Alabama. And then I saw a job opening for a producer director at an ad agency in Atlanta, applied for the job, and that's where those HBO Sports credentials paid off. Was when I walked in there, instead of, you know, asking them what they needed, I went in there and I kind of helped tell them what it took to put on a production of that caliber, and that's how I got the job. And I was there 4 years, and then in 2012 I started my own business, Golo, which has been going now almost 5 years, which is crazy to think, but here we are.
Yeah, man. Wow. That's awesome. It's great to hear your story and just your background and some of the challenges that you faced. One thing that really stuck out to me, what you said was at the beginning, you didn't say much about resume, like turning the resume in and hoping and waiting for an opportunity. You talked about showing up and just putting in the effort, putting in the time, and showing the owners or the guys who were there before you, the guys who you're trying to earn a job for, that you belong. And that really, really stuck out to me, man, because especially in our day and age, a lot of kids who are coming out of college now and trying to get, you know, into whatever industry, they really, I feel like, depend way too much on their resume and depend on things that really don't matter in the long run. You know, it might matter when you're getting in, but when you do step your foot in the door, it's like, what do you do when you're there? So that's one thing that really stuck out to me. And another thing was just like as you even move forward, as you got the opportunity with HBO Sports and did really good things, you still had to have challenges. Like you still, like you said, face times where you had to go and get that waiting job, something that you, I'm sure, did not want to do at all, man. But you had to continue to humble yourself and just capitalize on whatever opportunity that you can get, man. And I think that's a huge part of being a game changer, man. So that's awesome. It's great to hear your background. I love hearing people's background stories, man, because I just think when we see people, like if I were to look at you now and I didn't know you and know your background and see just the kind of stories that you produce and the shows that you're doing and things like that, I would never think that you had to go through what you had to go through to get where you are now, man. So it's awesome to hear. The next thing I want to know. Oh yeah, this question popped up in my head while you were talking. But did you always want to go this route? Like, did you have a separate dream when you were a child?
Well, I, like most kids who were sports fanatics, did have a dream. It was either to play shortstop for the Chicago Cubs or point guard for the LA Lakers. And you know, being a 5'6" little Jewish kid from Birmingham, Alabama, my dream died quickly at about age 14, 15. I was a good shortstop, great fielder, but could never hit the ball out of the infield once the field got bigger. So I could only bunt my way on for so long. So I think it was probably like junior varsity is when I quit playing baseball. Yeah. And same for basketball. I was a good little basketball player as a kid, but then age 13 hit, everybody got a growth spurt, and here I am, 35 years old, still waiting on my growth spurt. So the growth spurt never came, but I knew that I wanted to stay in sports because I loved being around it. I loved competition. I loved, if you weren't competing, I loved cheering for the guys that were competing. And so, believe it or not, as a kid, growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, we didn't have like a professional sports team. So my team became the Chicago Cubs because I would come home from school and the Cubs used to strictly play day games when I was growing up. So every afternoon at 2 p.m., or 3 p.m., I'd come home. The Chicago Cubs were on TV. I would watch the Cubs game. And as I got a little bit older, I would watch the game, but then I would start to broadcast the game myself. So I would turn down the sound and I would pretend that I was Harry Carey, who was the announcer of the Chicago Cubs at the time. Yeah. So my dad always joked that before I even knew what a Budweiser was, I was a Cub fan Bud man because Harry Carey was a Cub fan Bud man. That was his ad. So I used to turn down the sound and broadcast the games. And so I always thought that I wanted to be a broadcaster, that I wanted to be on camera, in front of the camera, announcing games as a play-by-play announcer. And honestly, thinking about how I became a producer and director and became behind the scenes was really looking back on it, it was probably more of a self-confidence thing. I lacked the self-confidence to think that I could be on camera, right? And I just was like, man, I don't think I'm good enough, or maybe I'm not good-looking enough, or whatever. So I lacked that self-confidence to be on camera. But I went, which looking back, now you look on TV, you're like, oh, I'm better looking than that guy. I could have done that.
Yes, it is.
But growing up, especially as like a teenager, when you're self-conscious or whatever, I just thought, you know what, being on TV is probably not for me. But I would go to, broadcast and see games and see, man, there's all these people behind the scenes. Maybe I could be one of those guys, right? Yeah. So, actually, when I was in college, I went to school out in Colorado. And so I would drive to Denver and I would try and get on the Colorado Rockies broadcast as a PA or what we call in the business a runner, which is basically someone that gets coffee, runs to Home Depot, does the little errands, that kind of stuff. Man. So I did that for the Colorado Rockies for Fox Sports Net's broadcast. So that was kind of like my birth into it. It was like, hey, there's all this stuff that goes on behind the scenes. Maybe I can be a behind the scenes guy. And then when I was in college, I loved reading and I loved writing. So the writing and the storytelling kind of went along with the the producer director route. And so that's kind of how I fell into it. I didn't grow up going, hey, I want to produce sports documentaries or sports features, but I knew that I wanted to be in sports. And, you know, so that's kind of how I didn't always, I mean, I think to answer your original question, no, I didn't know I always wanted to do this, but, you know, I had an idea of what industry I wanted to be in, and that's kind of what led me to where I am now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And, you know, your story resonates, I feel like, with so many athletes, man, who they start out, they're great, Little League, whatever it is, but like you said, they don't hit that growth spurt, or, you know, they may just move to a different city or, you know, get a different group of friends or whatever it is, and they end up getting away from their sport. But at the same time, you've shown that through your story that you can still be involved with it, and you're on the front lines. Like, I mean, most people probably won't know, because a lot of people don't know who's behind cameras and who's behind production. But I'd love for you to just share some of the people who you've had the opportunity to work with.
Yeah, so when I was at HBO Sports, for me, how I kind of, you know, started was on the Bob Costa show, as I said. And so we did feature stories on, you know, the best in the business. So I was on shoots with, at the time, I remember, because I'm still a diehard NBA fan, but I was on a shoot with Bob Costas' producer, a fantastic guy by the name of Bruce Kornblatt that I learned under and learned a lot from. But Bruce was producing, Bob's doing the interview, and here I am taking notes, and he's interviewing Reggie Miller.
Wow.
And we're following Reggie Miller, and I'm just like, this is amazing, you know. And then, of course, you know, we do probably, you know, we interview Reggie, we interview Rip Hamilton, who Reggie at the time was retiring and kind of passing the torch to Rip and this kind of thing. We probably did 5 interviews for about an 8-minute piece. And so I thought it was so cool, but then I got into the edit room and realized I was responsible for logging all the interviews, going through all the footage, asking for additional footage. So that's when I realized, oh man, this is a lot of work to tell an 8-minute story after doing, you know, 2 hours worth of shooting.
Yeah.
So Reggie was one of my first that I'll always remember. It's like, hey, that was really cool. There were so many other ones at HBO Sports. And, you know, and especially in boxing, I came along during the Floyd Mayweather, Oscar De La Hoya sort of heyday of them. So, you know, worked with and shot with Mayweather, worked with and shot with Oscar De La Hoya, and did those kind of things. And then when I left to do the Olympics in late 2008, that was the big Usain Bolt world record Olympics, where he kind of became this massive star. He started doing the lightning bolt celebration and all that stuff. And I'll never forget, I was holed up in an edit room for about 33 days over in Beijing. That was my job. Was, you know, everyone said, "Oh my God, you're working the Olympics in China. How cool is that?" Well, I literally went to the what we call the International Broadcast Center every day for about 14 hours every day. My shift was supposed to be from 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. But it ended up being you'd have to get in a little early, so you get in at 1 p.m. and you work till about 3 a.m. So I was on this crazy schedule, and I never got to get out of the broadcast center because I was always editing. But we got to choose one event or one thing that we would go to as, you know, to sort of sneak off the compound, if you will. And so I was about 15 feet from the finish line when Usain Bolt broke the world record in the 100 and the 200. Wow. So that was, to me, I have a photo still on my iPhone where I was right next to him when he did the first lightning bolt pose.
Wow.
So that, to me, was one of those moments where, like, wow, that was pretty cool. And then more recently, you know, I'm a field producer and feature producer for NFL Network. So I'm at all the Thursday night football games, the NFL draft, the combine, all that kind of stuff. And I would say, to me, like, some of the most interesting things that I've gotten to do and my favorite things that I get to do involve and surround the NFL draft, because, you know, shooting feature stories on players that are already in the league, you know, are usually the higher profile guys or guys that feel like they've made it, or, you know, you feel like, hey, this guy is a big star. But to me, following that journey of the draft is so exciting and so interesting, and my favorite part of the job, you know. And then it all kind of, for me, I do a lot of storytelling leading up to the draft, and then it all kind of culminates in that that draft day, and I am lucky enough to be Deion Sanders' field producer usually on draft day, and he does for those that don't know, he does all the interviews on stage when a guy gets picked. So
Wow.
I am on stage right next to Roger Goodell and the player that was picked right when that hug happened.
Dang.
And to me, that's the coolest part of my job, where you're just like, hey, the hours may not be great, the travel may not be great, the long hours in the edit room, those are not things that you look forward to and, think are exciting. But to sit there and watch some guy, his moment happen and that dream happen, to me is just really cool. And that's I guess I would say that's my favorite part of the process. I mean, for Falcons fans, they'll know the kid Tack McKinley that just was drafted by the Falcons, and he went crazy when he was sick, and I was right there, and Deion was right there too, and we're kind of sorting through how to do the interview and how to still make it happen for TV, and I think he was so fired up that it just kind of happened, and to me it was one of the most it's definitely one of the most talked about.
Oh yeah. Dang, you were right there in front of him, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, so those are kind of my favorite moments, and then you always kind of, they say never meet your heroes, but I've found that not to be true. I've found that all the guys that I like and cheer for are usually guys that after I leave the interview or leave the shoot, I still would like and cheer for.
Wow. Who's one of the most interesting guys you come across, just like a real big character?
I'll say this. So I know this may not be too popular on your podcast, but I growing up in Alabama, I grew up a lifelong Alabama football fan, going to all the games as a kid, and I've maintained that love and loyalty to the Alabama football team and the University of Alabama. So I have been fortunate enough to shoot with and interview Nick Saban a couple times.
Wow. What was he like?
I would say he's exactly what you think he would be like. He's all business.
Yeah.
But you walk away from the shoot and you go, man, I got exactly what I need. So, he gets it. I'll put it that way. So he's really, really good at that. Let's see some other ones that, so that'd be the one that I'm like, hey, that was pretty cool. I got to interview Nick Saban, right?
Yeah, sure.
So that I would put that in the cool category. Some of the most interesting, those kind of range. I would say, if I had to pick off the top of my head, a mutual friend that we share, Malcolm Mitchell. He was a guy that I was fortunate enough to be able to tell his story before the draft, and I walked away from that, shoot and that feature going, man, what a great kid and a great man now, really, grown into a man, but just a fantastic guy. And I walked away knowing, you know what, even if it's not football, it's going to be something. This guy's going to be successful.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
So he was definitely one of the more interesting guys that I've had the pleasure and joy of meeting. And then we do. One of our jobs is we travel the country for the Nissan Heisman House. So we get to work with most of former Heisman winners. And so that's always pretty cool. I mean, you just think of the list of guys that have won a Heisman Trophy. And, we've shot with them all, Johnny Manziel, Robert Griffin III, so guys that are in the news and in the spotlight, we've shot with those guys. And then we've shot with some of the lesser known legends, from John David Crow to running back from South Carolina, George Rogers. And those characters, to me, are the guys that I'm like, wow, what an amazing guy. This guy won a Heisman Trophy and, can still walk down the street and nobody knows who he is, but he's still kind of got that, he's got that Medal of Honor that, so few people have.
Yeah. Wow. No, that is awesome, man. That is awesome. Well, it's great to hear about a lot of the people who you've come in contact with. I mean, I'm sure you could talk on and on about just the amazing experiences that you had, man. Now I want to know about what was your biggest failure that you experienced during your career, that moment where you're just like, oh crap, man, this is probably it for me. Did you ever have a moment like that?
I've had a couple. To give you a peek behind the curtain, I've certainly had a couple. let's use that Reggie Miller story as a quick example. So that was my first feature story to work on as an associate producer, and so we come to the. I was working with this longtime producer, a guy named Bruce Kornblatt, that was a fantastic producer, still is, and so we did all these interviews for this Reggie Miller piece, and he writes out his version of a script, which is just some shorthand, what we call in the business time codes of, I want the interview to go from this time to this time, this time to this time, this time to this time. So we sit down in the edit, and he gives me the note. I sit with the editor for about 2 days. He comes in and he, looks at the piece, and he says, well, this is great. Now let's start putting in the B-roll. I'm thinking, the B-roll. He's like, yeah, all the moments that he's talking about in the piece, we need to show those moments. I said, well, where are those moments? He goes, well, you were supposed to get them.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm like, oh, I didn't know that's how it works. He's like, yeah, you got to get all the footage, you got to do all the things. So at the time, I had to call NBA Entertainment, which is how we did the footage request at the time, and find all these random moments. I mean, Reggie Miller hitting a three against, the Cavs, Reggie Miller doing this, a special kiss, Reggie Miller doing this. So I stayed up for about 2 days, putting in the request, going through the footage, getting everything done. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy never is going to want to work with me again. I've delayed the process. I've really screwed up. I should start looking for new jobs. But the piece ended up working out and being great. And I think what I thought was like my biggest, failure or downfall ended up being one of my strongest selling points to this producer was he kind of realized, hey, the kid didn't know what the hell he was doing, but when he realized what he was supposed to do, he did whatever it took to do it, right? Yeah. He did whatever it took to get it done. And so I think after that, he would request me on his pieces. He said, hey, I want to work with, they call me Goldie. I want to work with Goldie on this one. Nice. So that was a moment that could have been a massive failure or pitfall that ended up being a selling point or a success story, because it's like, hey, I messed up, but I showed that, whatever it took to get the job done, I was willing to do.
Yeah, man. Awesome.
So that would be one, and then I could tell another one that's not as fun and more technical, but it's a little scarier. So if you have like another minute, I could tell that one.
Yeah, I got a minute, man. I'd love to hear it.
Okay, well, we were doing a show, big show on CBS right before the Final Four, and it was a CBS Sports Spectacular, and it's supposed to be this fantastic show that airs right before the Final Four, and so we have to get the show to CBS 24 hours in advance before the show airs, because we're an outside production company, and the show's done. It's been approved by the client. We're ready to go. We're ready to get this half-hour show to tape and get it on the air, and let our client and our sponsors see it, and everybody that's paid for the show see it. And so we finished the show, and we're in whatever city the Final Four is in, either Houston or New Orleans, I can't remember. But we finished the show, and we have to get the show from the computer to a piece of tape. We were still using tape at the time. And should be one click of the button, right? In every edit room I've ever said, oh, let's put this thing to tape. We could not get the show on tape to deliver the show to CBS. And this is, we couldn't get the show to tape. We couldn't do it. Well, all these technical issues are happening, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we're never going to make the show. All of our sponsors are going to be disappointed. Everyone's going to be disappointed, and ultimately I'm going to be out of a job, right? But, we made it. We made it right before air, but I will tell you that that's the longest in my career I've ever stayed up without sleep. I think I went about 40 hours straight without sleep because I was going to finish the show and go right to bed, but finishing the show ended up being finishing the show, and then for 20 of the 24 hours stressing if we were going to be able to get it to tape or not.
Wow.
So we got the show to tape. The show aired. Nobody ever knew, except now people that listen to this podcast.
Right.
we made it happen. And but that was definitely a moment where I thought, oh my God, if this thing does not air, I'll never work again. And of course, I probably would work again.
Yeah,
but I think that's how, when you're in a moment and it's happening, you're thinking, oh God, this might be the end of me. Yeah. So that was definitely those are the two that come to mind immediately. They're like, hey, that could have been really bad, but it ended up, being okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely think that's cool. That's something that me as an athlete, or when we're on the field, we don't think about any of those things that are going on kind of behind the scenes and the video aspect. But that's a lot of times where we can go back and we can capture a lot of our memories or remember a lot of things and details that may or may not happen. But we're focused on the game. We're focused on that play we made. You're focused on things like getting that right footage, or getting that right B-roll shot. So it's just awesome to hear that perspective on things, man. The next question I got for you, man. I know you've talked a lot about the things that you did kind of early on that set yourself apart, and so I want to dig a little bit deeper into that, and just I'd love to hear about what you learned about leadership so far, just from being in your position, because I know a lot of times on the set, like, you're the guy who kind of steers the direction of how the filming and the production goes, man. So I'd love to hear kind of your take on leadership.
Well, there's one. It's kind of similar to your world and where you came from the last 20 so years. It's a team effort, right? So you're playing a team game, and one thing that I learned early on, this is when I was still a associate producer at HBO Sports. I had this amazing director that I worked with, especially on live events, and he was in charge of a crew of like 50 people, 55 to 60 people. Right. And I noticed how he was treating everyone. So if it was his best camera guy or the guy that was pulling cable or whatever, he would treat everybody the same, and he was like a cheerleader. He was, hey, great job doing that, great job doing this. And he once told me something that has stuck with me ever since, that moment. And he said, whether you are the top guy on the show or you are the runner getting coffee, there is no job more important than one another. We all have to do our job in order to get this thing on the air to look, sound, and feel as good as it possibly can. It's one thing to say that, but it's another thing to put that into action. And so I would see the way he talked to people. I would see the way he talked to, the guys pulling the cable and the camera guys and the technical director. But then I'd see how he talked to the producer, who was almost his boss. And he talked to everybody the same way. And so I sort of learned from that. And that's how I took what he used to have a funny saying, which was, there's no small shows, only small paychecks. So you treat every show like a really big show, and you treat everybody on the show like they're really important and that they have a really big job, because they do. And so that's what I've tried to do is, I've tried to, when I go on set, we've got camera guys, we've got lighting guys, we've got audio guys, but everybody has to do their job in order for our production to be as good as it possibly can. So, you kind of, as a producer, you're almost like you're a coach. You're trying to put everybody in place, you're almost like a GM, really. It's like you got to get the right personnel in place. And then that personnel has to be able to execute the goal or the game plan. And so, if you've done your job as a producer, then once the shoot is happening, I've always had the mindset of, everything should be able to run itself, because if I hire a really good camera guy, I trust what he's going to tell me. Hey, that's a good shot. Let's do that. If I trust an audio guy and I hear a noise happen or whatever, and I look at him and give him, the thumbs up, and he gives me the thumbs up back, that means, hey, this is not going to be a problem for you in the edit room. Let's keep it moving. I think two things: treat everybody the way you want to be treated. Treat them like they're the most important part of the show, because at the end of the day, if their little world doesn't work, the whole universe is not going to spin. And then hire good people. Trust they'll do a good job, and I think if you put that trust in people, they will reciprocate that, and they'll act accordingly, right? So if you say, hey, if you think this is a good shot, I trust you, let's do it, then they're going to make sure it's the best possible thing they can do because that's their name on it.
Yep. You're exactly right, man. And those are two powerful leadership insights, man. And a lot of times when I look at different organizations or teams or any type of situation, man, it's like you have a lot of times when things go bad, people who are in positions of authority who speak one thing or talk about a principle or say, oh, we should all stick together, or it's all for the guy next to you, but they don't live it. Like you said, they don't treat everybody the same. It's all about, what that person's title is or their level of seniority or whatever it is, man. So that's powerful. And it's great to hear. And another thing that I thought about too is in your industry and for what you do, a lot of times you hear about in leadership having like a vision, and like that's even so much more important than what you do because you have to create that vision and like sell it as a product. So it's like so much more important for you to like drive the importance of like creating a vision and getting everybody on the same page with seeing that vision and like bringing it to light, which is rare for a lot of different industries because they may talk about it, but it's not like they have to actually put it on tape, and like show it to the world. So I think that's really neat.
Yeah, it's it kind of like thinking back on our conversation so far. I thought that growing up, I thought the hardest job was to be the play-by-play broadcaster, calling the game.
Yeah.
But put it now to put it in the way that we just have, it's like, hey, sometimes the hardest part is just getting everything set up so that broadcaster can do the play-by-play.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that is the challenge a lot as a producer or director is, having a vision and making sure that all your teammates, because they're not your players, they're not playing, they're your teammates, and making sure all your teammates are kind of pulling in that same direction or pushing in that same direction or running the play that either you have the vision or then a lot of times in the industry, the vision that the client wants, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So I think there's always two kinds of projects. There's the passion projects and the storytelling ones, and then there's the ones where you execute what the client wants. And it just depends, but regardless of the task at hand, it's making sure that you got the vision has been communicated, and everybody is pointing in that direction or is, striving to achieve whatever it is that goal is for the day or, the project or, whatever.
Yeah. No, that's awesome stuff, man. Okay, I got another real good question for you, man.
Okay.
Yeah, so here it goes. If you could leave one piece of advice for anyone who's thinking about going into your career path, what would that be? Like if you could go back and talk to your younger self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell that younger person?
I would say a couple things. To steal a line from one of my mentors, it's a director, there are no small shows, only small paychecks. So no matter how small the show is at that particular time, treat it like it's the biggest show in the world. Treat it like it's the Super Bowl. Yeah. So if you get called on the shoot and you're like, this is a little corporate shoot, it's not a big deal, it's not really what I want to be doing, but sure, I'll show up and be a PA for the day for a couple $100 or whatever the going rate is. Don't look at it that way. Look at it like, hey, today is the biggest shoot I'll be on, and I want to treat it as such. And if you do that, I think your enthusiasm and your energy will shine through, because there's been times, and I mean, you can say it, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. I mean, there's been times in my 15-year career that I said, I don't want to do today. And I bet it showed in my performance, you know? So I would say, however you can muster up that energy to treat every show, every shoot like it's the biggest one you'll ever go on every day, that enthusiasm will come back and shine through. And then I think the second thing is, it's cliche, but the power of positivity, man. If you're a positive person and you show up and you got a smile on your face and you're ready to work and that goes a long way. And I mean, I've heard that so many times when people are like, hey man, your energy was really good. And that stuff translates. So I think showing up, being positive, having good energy, and then don't be afraid, because a lot, they say a lot about my business is sometimes not what you know, it's who you know.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's something to that. I think there's something to, if you know somebody, or you kind of know somebody or whatever, don't be afraid to ask that person for help, or ask that person, hey, do you know anyone? Because that will get you in the door. But that's all it will do. That's all it will do. It will get you in the door. But once you get in that door, you better be ready to run through it,
Heck yeah.
So I think there's a couple, I guess there's a couple little nuggets of advice in that rambling. The first of which is show up, be positive, have good energy. The second is use your connections. Use your, do your, if you don't have any connections, do some research to figure out how you can grow those, get those connections, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that'd be kind of, I guess, my advice is, show up, treat every show like it's the biggest show you'll ever work on, and then find a way in, find a connection, find some sort of common thread that you may have with someone on a certain show or at a certain company or certain network that you want to get in with, and use that to your advantage. Don't exploit it, but use it.
Yep. And I'm sure in your case, man, too, it's like, when you're on a set with somebody, you may not ever see that person again because of the level of people who you come in contact with, man. So it puts so much more emphasis on, like, for you to capitalize on opportunities, like to meet people in the network and just open up your mouth, man. I see, especially a lot of younger, going back to like if you want to call it millennials or whatever. But a lot of times we have a hard time just stepping outside that box and just like socializing, or just, going out there and being a go-getter, man. And like, if you really want to be successful, I realized at an early age, especially going through football, man, you got to be ready for any opportunity that comes. That's definitely great insight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's somebody that's on the air now. I want to say it's Bomani Jones. He uses it as a joke, but it actually is true. He says, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Yep.
And so, I think that's kind of funny. It's like, stay ready, because you got to be on. You always, especially if you're on set, whatever, you need to be on. You need to be ready to strike when the iron's hot. And I think that's a great lesson, or a great piece of advice there, that you just gave, which is, sometimes you got to get off the computer and get out of the phone for a minute and go out there and, as they say, press some palms, shake some hands, get to know some people, go to as many networking things as you can and make that personal connection, because there's no substitute for that personal connection, man. That's what drives everything we do. And that would be the last piece of advice I would give someone is, ultimately, this is the business that I'm in, and I'm sure you can say this for many fields. It's a relationship business.
Oh yeah.
So you build those relationships with people.
Yeah.
The business part will come. So I think build that trust, build that relationship with someone, and then then you'll start seeing that come as like, oh, I got a buddy of mine that's he's an attorney. I got a buddy of mine that's a music guy. I got a buddy of mine that's a lighting guy. Whatever. Those are friends and relationships that you develop. And then when the job comes, you call on those friends or those people that you built that trust with, and you work with them. So.
Yep. Awesome, man. That's really, really good stuff. And I got this is a pretty deep question, man. So this kind of sums up.
I'm sitting down, so I'm ready.
All right. So what does being a game changer mean to you? And the reason why I ask this is because, we all have our different titles, we all have our different callings, but I feel like, you can do all those things and still not really be significant. You can do all these things and still, you can just be another one. I could just be another football player. You could just be another producer to come along. But I feel like everybody at the end of the day is striving to be a game changer in their industry, in their field. So can you just talk about what that means to you, and just like what do you want the world of production and directing or not even that, not even in your industry, but in general, what do you want the world to do differently because of what you did and because of you achieving your dreams?
Well, I think that is a deep question, and not one that I'm prepared to answer, but I'll try to do my best.
Yeah.
I think to me, the way that I can change the game or feel like, hey, I made an impact is sometimes, especially in the production world, it can be very protective. Everyone's guarded of what they have, or they're guarding what they want or whatever. And I try and live my life, especially in production, like an open book, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like to take all my relationships and build them, and bring them together. So I think the greatest impact that I could have is probably creating an environment or a set or a shoot or a project where you're like, hey, everyone here is working together and there's no hidden agendas. They're all in this thing together. They're all friends, or if they're not friends, they're all working towards a common goal. And so I think, like, at the end of the day, if someone walks away and goes, man, he built a really great team. He brought a lot of really cool people together for this project or this shoot or this documentary. That, to me, would be the way that I would view it, as like, hey, man, I changed the game. I went from everybody trying to, like, protect what they have or whatever to everybody being one big happy family and sharing, and kind of, rooting for the success of one another. So that would be my sort of way that I said, yeah, man, I think I maybe changed the game a little bit. So
that's awesome,
that would be cool for me. And then I guess personally, I've been doing so many short features and sponsored shows and that kind of thing, but I would love to make a documentary or a sports doc that was very impactful to someone that watched it and was inspired by it. Hey man, if that guy can make it out, then I can too. And so that would be from a content standpoint how I think, I would consider myself a game changer or consider, a game changing moment in my career.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And I think it's easy sometimes for us to devalue like the things that we've already done. And I'm like, you're already a game changer from what I see, and from the things that you've already accomplished and what you've been a part of. So it's like, and the crazy thing about it is a lot of people will watch some of the things that you've been a part of, some of the features that you've done, and they'll be inspired, but they won't even know that you were kind of the part of that team. So I think that's really neat to be a part of, man, and just having those things that are timeless, that stay around forever and continue to inspire people. It's kind of like being an author, just you're creating something that's always, somebody can watch it 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and still have the same emotion from when you created it. So that's really, really neat.
Well, thank you for that. That's not something I always remember. So thank you for helping me remember that. You wake up every day and people say, "Oh, you got a cool job." Like, well, it's just a job, But at times you don't think of it that way. So thank you for sort of reminding me of that. That's a helpful thing, And, and an important thing,
For real.
So I gotta confess something.
What's up?
So as a producer or director, right, I'm used to be the one asking questions. I'm used to being the one that's doing the interviewing. So, I might have done a little prep, or thought about it a little bit, but I couldn't really prepare for your question.
Yeah.
But what I could do is, when our interview is done, I have a very short list of questions that I wanted to know about you, because they're things that, even though we're friends and have known each other now a few months, I don't know about.
Okay.
Can I do that?
Yeah, sure. You can shoot any questions, man. I'm cool with that.
All right. Well, are we good to start that?
Yeah, that was pretty much it, man. The last thing I was gonna ask is, how can the listeners get a hold of you?
Okay, so they can do a couple things. Go to my website, which is goloatl.com. GOLO. That's the name of the production company. ATL.com. Because, hey, we're in Atlanta. We're a global company, right? We'll go anywhere you want, but we're based in Atlanta. So goloatl.com. you can check out our website. You can always find me on Twitter, DSG. That is my initials, NINATL. So DSG in ATL. So get to my website. If you're interested in navigating the website and get my email address, do it that way. And then you can always find me on Twitter, DSG in ATL.
And there you have it. That was my good friend, producer, director, CEO of Golo Productions, David Goldstein. You heard how you can get in touch with him. And if you want to get in touch with me, there's several ways. I'm always available for speaking engagements, available for coaching. If you have a book idea, if you're looking to get into public speaking, if you're somebody who's going through transition, feel free to reach out to me. You can get in touch with me through my website, RennieCurran.com, through my Twitter, at RennieCurran53, through my Instagram, at RennieCurran. And yeah, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm here for you guys. I'm here to serve. So I want to leave you with this last challenge, as I always do, to not just get caught up in this rat race of life, and to not just simply just exist, but to be a game changer. Thank you.